Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. By George, I'll tell you, this is St. Patty's Day. By the way, you got any green on?
No.
Probably skivvies or something, right?
No. You got to remember, I'm a young Marine. We don't wear skivvies.
Is that right? Okay.
We don't wear underwear.
I got you. Well, I've got mine.
Yeah,
on.
we go commando.
Is that what it is? Well, I got mine on. Okay,
Yeah.
Good. Well, happy St. Patty's Day. Sun is shining. It's beautiful out here in the Pacific Northwest, here in Portland, Oregon. Wow, what a day. But by George, we've got all sorts of issues that are facing us here in the city of Portland, here in Portland, Oregon. Okay, we're gonna do. I brought Fred on today. What we're gonna do? We're gonna do a little recap. One, we're gonna go into who is Ann Hardesty. Very interesting.
She's our newest city commissioner.
City commissioner, and you know, and both Fred and I, we pretty well know her background pretty up. I mean, we pretty know exactly what's going on. And I think people are still asking the question, well, how did she get elected? And why did she get elected? And when did she get elected? So we're going to talk about that piece aspect of it. We're going to also talk about some of the other issues. You know, we might talk a little bit about the national scene aspect of it, because just recently some gentleman, i.e. back in New Zealand, all right? I guess 50 people got shot and whatever. But the interesting about that piece is that why is it that the moment he mentioned Trump, all of a sudden we started targeting the whole issue of New Zealand. I mean, it would not be as pronounced today had someone not mentioned, whether he mentioned it or whatever. But the fact that somebody mentioned it. So my point is that, as you know, the media has made I say Trump wears two hats. One, just his own New York hat, and the other one, he ran for office. And so consequently, that's really what the deal is. So we're going to talk a little bit about that piece, because people need to know our feelings on that piece. And we got that piece. And then we're going to talk about some of the local politics we have here in Portland. We just recently went through the situation with, I think it's a mild deal about Joey Gibson, and how his name was brought up. I interviewed Joey when he first sort of got involved in this process. Gentleman was just a real estate guy, family man in Vancouver, and he was on the show, but he's no I don't consider a white supremacist. We'll define it. I mean, I think the definition of white supremacists and this, that, and the other has its own denomination, just like we have from the standpoint of minorities. You know, the word nigger and all this, that, and the other. That's a different ball game too. But the bottom line, we're going to talk about that, because I'm talking from a perspective.
Well, Joey and Trump suffer from the same thing.
Yeah, same.
Because Trump does not stand up to white supremacists, and neither does Joey.
Yeah.
Joey, I don't know Joey. We got a few mutual friends.
Yeah,
but Joey and I, and I know some one or two black people that like Joey. There's not too many white supremacists that say, "Hey, I got a white friend." Yeah. But Joey has got some devil in his details, if you know what I'm talking about. He's got some people that march with him and support him that are straight up white supremacists. And instead of Joey inviting them to go away,
but as you know, when you
he says, "Come on down, boys."
But as you know, I don't know whoever runs when you're marching, anybody can join a march. That's a fact.
Okay, hold
on. We had him on. I had him on the other day, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about his progress as he up to date.
No, there's no progress with him.
No. This is what I'm saying. I'm just saying. You didn't see the show.
No, I saw the show, and he's living in La La Land. Look, if you are not with white supremacists, when you see them become part of your organization, like you're marching, you invite them to leave. You let people know your organization isn't about that. You don't hug them. You don't say, "Welcome down, friends," and then go and tell me to my face you're not a white supremacist, or aren't trying to kiss up to a white supremacist. You know what I'm talking about?
You're saying that he projects that when you see him on the
Yeah, he's got people who wear white supremacist patches, and they show up at his functions.
Okay.
And he does not invite them out. You understand what I'm talking about? He does not invite them out.
What would you?
I mean, let me ask you this: if somebody hired a person who was a child molester to work at their daycare, okay, and they say, "Well, look, I'm going to make sure your kid's safe," would you trust them? Because they let a child molester in their house willingly. He's letting
knowing
it. He's letting these people in his house. You understand? There is no room for people of liberty, whether you're a liberal or conservative, for white supremacists. Okay, there is no space for that.
How would you define white supremacy?
White supremacy, easy. The Klan, the various white supremacist groups that feel white people are superior. I mean, how would people feel about me being here in Portland if I was hanging out with the New Israelites? And they've tried to come here. They tried to come here when I was in King neighborhood. I had the New Israelites, and I had the the Malcolm X people, not the Malcolm X people, the Nation of Islam. You know what I'm talking about? And I had to fight both of them as president of King neighborhood. I had the New Israelites come to King neighborhood and inform all the white people.
Who are they?
Oh, they're these darn racist black people who, they call themselves the real Israelites because, originally the Israelites were all black originally. I know a lot.
Israelites?
The original Jews were all black. So the way they look at it, you can't, if you're white and you're Jewish, you're not really Jewish. You get what I mean? As a matter of fact, they have a thing against all white people. They're like the black version of the Klan. You understand what I'm talking about? They're like the black version of the Klan, but they don't have as much money or power, and they don't have the numbers. But they're still very disruptive.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
So when I was president of King neighborhood and they showed up at my meeting, how am I supposed to treat them? Am I supposed to treat them like we're buddies?
How'd you deal with it?
I told them to get the hell out.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Okay.
And then after the meeting, I went to their house.
Okay.
Said, I don't want to see you around doing that stuff in my neighborhood. We got problems.
And you were president of King neighborhood.
I was president of King neighborhood.
Okay.
And I know they came up with this stuff. Well, we're residents of the community and blah. Said, you're residents of the community until you start talking this new Israelite BS. Until then, after that point, you're not a member of my community. You're a threat to my community.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
Well, Trump does the same thing. He does this big tent thing with white supremacists. They show up, they support him, they say great things about him, and he doesn't do anything about it. So why shouldn't a person
But how
feel?
and why did he do this?
Because they're votes.
But yeah, that's right. But at the same time, he was in New York. I mean,
There's white supremacists in New York.
We both agreed that New York is New York.
I know.
I mean, the entire political process right now is a New York kind
But
of
when was the
version of
last
that.
time a New York politician did well in the South?
Yeah, but the bottom line, the guy had not even run for.
I understand. I think his people courted the Southern white supremacists and stuff like that because they wanted to do well in the South without having to go down there and get a Southern running mate. You understand what I'm talking about? They didn't want to go down. There's no LBJs in the South these days. The only reason Kennedy did well in the South in 1960, which was the last East Coast politician to do well in the South, well, they had LBJ. You get my meaning? And at the time they thought he was
Texas. Now he had his base.
I know, but still, they went LBJ. They didn't want to go Mississippi or Alabama, which they were trying to get him to do. Yeah. He went Texas.
Well, that's where he was born.
Exactly, and they thought, of course, LBJ was going to turn it down, and then they were going to go to Minnesota. You see what I'm talking about? But instead, LBJ took it. But what I'm getting to is, I think he's just been courting that vote down there. You understand? And that's all he's thinking.
But think about
I don't think he's thinking about
the
message he is sending out to people.
But think about it, before he got in the race, his base was New York.
Yeah.
He knew black folks. He knew everybody.
Yeah.
In New York.
He's got a lot of black friends.
But from a New York city.
Correct.
And then when he was first elected, he basically tried to identify with country blah 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 routine. Remember, he had black ministers. He had all kinds of folks.
Hey, he did. He's done a lot.
All those celebrities like Barkley and all those kind of guys.
He's done more, and a lot of people are going to hate to hear me say this. He's done more for black people than Clinton did.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Already. Yeah. Trump legitimately has done a lot. Matter of fact, the whole thing he did with the prison reform bill, there is nothing Clinton did, and I like Clinton. There's nothing Clinton did that comes close to Trump's prison reform bill, whether you like it or not. Like Van Jones says, you hate to say it.
Bringing the CNN now. What's that?
But you're like, gee whiz, that prison reform bill is a game changer. It could be a game changer. It's the beginning of addressing the damage this war on black people called the war on drugs has done. A war that Clinton expanded. a Democrat.
He and Hillary.
You know, and he and Hillary expanded.
Yeah, he and Hillary.
You know, how many black people around this country are suffering because of that poor decision making? And with Clinton admits it was a mistake, but Clinton does the white guy thing, the liberal white guy thing. Well, I'm just sorry. I'm sorry I've ruined hundreds of thousands of black people's lives. I really wish I hadn't have done it. But trust me some more. You get my meaning?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, like I tell people on Facebook, we're in a dark place right now.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to politics, because honestly, guys, I mean, gee whiz, you know, you're looking at what's going on right now with the white supremacists being, you know, active, and you're like, geez, how are we going to turn this tide?
Well, that's the whole idea. The idea is we're going to have to turn this tide.
Well, no, we need people like Joey Gibson and other people, and Trump. We need people like that.
I'm going to be talking about
speaking out.
Well, let me stop you just for a moment. Again, as you can see, this is Fred Stewart. You've seen Fred before. Fred's run for office. He's in the real estate business aspect of it. He was born here, raised here.
I wasn't born here.
You weren't born here? You wasn't born here?
I came here when I was 11.
Right. He was born in the Marine Corps.
No, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, another liberal area.
But anyway, the bottom line, Fred is here today, and as you can see, we're going to begin. We're going to really have a good show today, and we just started on that end of it. So that's our national peace aspect of it. Let's bring it home for a bit here in the Portland metropolitan area, and we're going to talk about varying subject matter. But you know, the question, the whole issue was that we've got a new city commissioner in Ann Hardesty. She's kind of like the focal point right now, and in many ways, she's pretty well dictating everything that's going on in City Hall now. You know,
I wouldn't go that far.
Is that what I mean by that? The perception, if you will, and that's why we're going to talk about this. We're just going to give you sort of an update on her candidacy, and maybe an update on her activities right now, and where we are with that piece, and whether or not those are the major issues that's facing this city, i.e. state, because we are the largest county and the largest city here in the state of Oregon.
We are.
And so we're ground zero, so to speak.
We are.
And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Joanne Hardesty. Well, you knew Joanne.
I've known her
when she first
over 20, 25 years.
And she came from back east, right?
Yep,
back east there. Was it Maryland?
I think it's Maryland.
Maryland aspect of it. And she came here, and I'm gonna just throw this out. When she came here, I think she went to California. She stayed in several other areas before she came here, in that aspect of it. But what was interesting about from what I saw, and I can talk to that, and I basically did the same thing. I mean, I'm not from here. I wasn't raised here, or whatever, but I came here as a Marine. And but the bottom line is that I wasn't at the table. Never have been at the table. And so when you think about her background too, in all due respect, she was military too. She was a vet, Navy vet.
She was Navy.
But you said
female Navy.
Oh, female Navy. Oh, really?
She was a wave.
She was.
Come on.
What's the difference in a wave and what's your?
That's a female Navy. I mean, they do clerical work. I mean, I'm proud of what they've done. They're good, but you know,
but not the core, not the hardcore stuff. Okay.
Most women join the Navy because they want to meet a nice Marine.
Okay, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, let's get down.
She didn't meet one.
Okay. But, I think she married someone here.
Yeah, she did.
In Bowman.
No, Hardesty.
Yeah.
Hardesty.
No, Hardesty. That's her recent.
Okay.
Yeah. But Joanne Bowman, I remember him. He was a musician. I remember he was.
Oh, she was married back then.
Yeah, she was married. A guy named Bowman. Yeah, a guy named Bowman. Neat guy. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about that. What did you know about it when she first ran for office? Set it up. What was the stage? I mean, what was her MO at the time? Well, I know she was president of the NAACP.
Yeah.
She was working for the Reverends, at Bethel and.
No, I was happy Joanne ran. I mean, Joanne was on my list of people I felt should run for city council, or even state rep or senate again or something like that. I was happy that Joanne ran. Right now, where I'm at, I mean, there's a couple of things she's done that I'm a little disappointed in. But like I tell a lot of people, Bruce, the hardest political job in Oregon, and I've heard this from people who've had more than just the city council job.
Yeah.
Very few city commissioners move on to another political job. It's that much it's just that type of job. But the ones that I've talked to, the very few, everybody said that the city commissioner job is the hardest political job in the state of Oregon. And then I heard it from another friend of mine who, and people aren't going to like me bringing up his name, but that knew or knows Goldschmidt very well.
Yeah.
And they asked him several times. They said, Neil, what is the hardest political job you ever had? You've been a city commissioner, you've been a mayor, you've been a governor. What was harder between the three? And he said straight up, being city commissioner was the absolute hardest. The absolute period hardest. And he goes, it got a little harder being mayor, because of the way he ran it. But regardless, just being in that seat was 10 times harder than being governor.
But let's get back down to Joanne for a minute.
Well, what I'm getting to is she's learning.
She's learning.
For years, she's been knocking on that door.
But when was her base?
She's been like, you don't watch Game of Thrones.
Yep.
But those that watch Game of Thrones know Odor. She's been Odor for years. So now she's dealing with the White Walkers all day.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about? And it's a lot different.
Yeah, but let's think about that.
It's a lot different.
But she's dealing with, but where was her base? How did she generate that base?
Well, she's had several bases. I mean, she's an outspoken black person, given her perspective of the black experience, dealing with a lot of liberal issues in Portland. Mostly she's been in with law enforcement,
What about KBOO?
Oh, yeah, she's been on KBOO for years.
That's her, yeah, that's
Each time I ran for office, I had to go and let her interview me at KBOO. That's fine. No, she's got a nice base. The only real conflict Joanne and I have ever had is she's my chief milk and cookier when it comes to black gang members.
Oh,
she's got nothing but love. You can go out, be a black dude, murder like 50 black people. Joanne has got some forgiveness for you. You be a white cop and say a cuss word in the presence of a black man, and she wants to, gut the guy. Yeah, you know what I mean? Gut him. Yeah, hey, you cussed in front of a black person. But look, it's not that the things she says about cops isn't, somewhat valid. We've just always disagreed on her being full tilt. I'm going to go after, white cops, and I'm going to let black guys just go out and do whatever they want. Me, I want to go, I'm a Marine. I want to go after every threat. I want to identify every single threat there is, and I want to sit right next to that threat. You know what I'm talking about? I want to say, if you want to pull something, you got to pull it with me first. You know what I'm talking about? And, but she's not that type. She's a different leader, and she's learning, and she's making some, normal, what I would figure, just normal rookie mistakes. She's a rookie.
And that happens.
Yeah, she's a rookie.
One doesn't have access with behind the door.
I've had two mayors tell me, people don't understand, two former mayors tell me at different times that people don't understand that there's areas that they've got a lot of power, and there's areas that they don't have much power, and they're not obvious.
Okay.
You understand what I'm talking about? So there's areas that most of us think a city commissioner or a mayor has a lot of power in, and they probably don't. And then there's other areas where you would think they have no power, and they're all together. They're it. They're the final say. And one of the issues that bugged me with Joanne was that guy that went to the city council last week about that sidewalk issue, where the sidewalk issue. Where, the sidewalk issue is a complaint-oriented issue. Somebody complains, and then they go out and investigate. Well, the news people did a background check and everything and found nobody complained about this guy's sidewalk. And, oh, by the way, his sidewalk was not, it was compliant. There was no reason for him to replace his sidewalk or for the city to replace his sidewalk. And then when the city does replace his sidewalk, it's no longer compliant. They did such a sloppy job that from the get-go now, it's no longer compliant. And they're going to make this guy pay for this? And, to me, as a city commissioner, I'd be worried that maybe somebody who works for my city is trying to, pick on this guy. Maybe some city inspector is upset that maybe this guy's, some girl or some guy that this inspector sweet on is interested in this guy or something, or maybe he's mad at him for something that happened in high school or something.
Well, she doesn't identify with that at this point in time.
Well, no,
she's still training.
Well, she's still training, but she's got a city commissioner. Our best city commissioners, they were up front. They were point leaders. You understand? I know Gretchen Kafuri, if she had been there, that would have bugged her. That this guy's, sidewalk was deemed not appropriate. and it was in compliance. And then when the city replaces it, the city puts in a faulty sidewalk and wants him to pay for it, and they can't paper trail how the whole thing came up in the first place. You understand what I'm talking about?
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of power the city's got. And this guy seems like he's in his 30s, late 30s, maybe early 40s. He's younger than me.
So what's the
But
result?
you know what I worry about is,
Okay.
what about somebody who's got a problem with somebody older?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Because look, if a city inspector did that to my mother, I would, oh my God, his wife would be so mad at him. She'd say, I don't want Fred here. He scares me.
So where is it right now?
Huh?
Where is that issue?
Well, they're making the guy pay for it.
He's gonna pay for it.
They're making him pay.
What was the vote?
It was unanimous. They
Really?
punted it.
Oh, really?
And I would have expected, of all of the city commissioners, I would have expected Joanne to speak up on that. Because stuff like that happened to black people so much in Northeast Portland. A lot of real estate over there at the hospital, back in the 70s when they wanted to get black people out of inner North Portland, the very first thing the city would do is hit them up on their sidewalks. Because the city back then in the 70s and 60s, they knew black people could not afford to fix the sidewalks, probably. Maybe one or two could. But if you hit up 10 black people for sidewalks, probably 7 of them are going to not be able to afford it. You get my meaning?
Okay.
And then it sets up the conditions to go in and buy them out. You understand what I'm talking about? So, you would think a black woman like her, a woman who's, an advocate like her.
But like you said, she's new, and in all due respect, I mean, she went back on her base again. She went back to communicate with her base the other day, this past Thursday, back on KBOO.
Yeah.
She's back on
Which is
cable.
good.
She's back on cable from 8 to 9, folks, if you want to hear her. Every Thursday, she's going to be there.
Which is good, very
8
risky.
to 9. But the bottom line is that she started out with, i.e., the issues, one of the major issues she's focusing on. That was police work.
Well, if I was working for Joanne, I would say, Joanne, if you cannot handle the short stuff like this thing with the sidewalks as a city commissioner,
you call her Thursday?
I'll probably call her next time I see her. I'll tell her. But if she can't handle the small stuff, like that poor guy that got, reamed by the city over his sidewalk.
Well, like I said,
you know what I'm talking about? She's not. How is she going to handle the complicated stuff of law enforcement?
But I've never heard her talk about concrete, man. You know what I mean?
No. It doesn't matter. Once you become a city commissioner, you talk about everything.
Well, everything across the board.
Yeah. You may be for one thing,
but her focus was all about police.
Hold on. I understand that. That's how things were able to be before she became a city commissioner. Now she's a city commissioner.
No, that's what she was doing then.
That she's going to have to change.
That was part of her major. I'm just saying, that's all she's talking about.
Bruce,
the whole hour.
That's why they allow you opportunity to appeal to the full city council.
Well,
You understand what I'm talking about?
that.
The city commissioners have legislative, judicial, and executive power
I understand.
for the whole city, not just the bureaus that they run. Get my meaning?
Oh, she's learning.
Well, yeah, and I'm throwing that as an example.
She's learning.
But those of you out there with sidewalks that the city comes and gets you, for something. Go ahead and paper trail that thing. Make sure you find out.
Let's talk about it. Here was a. I'm just going to show. This is a paper that I've known for a number of years. At least it's free. You can get the thing for free. You can check things out. This was
It's actually the better paper.
It is, and it was an excellent issue. Just in all regards to the. In fact, Joey was mentioned in that piece, and that's one of the reasons why I interviewed him, from the standpoint that. I think, and she was there, basically calling him the white president on an ongoing basis. Mm-hmm. But my point is that because I interviewed him back again.
Yeah.
And, the whole idea, we got to solve some of these problems. So, but the fact of the matter is, they had this gathering, if you will, forum at the black church, at Bethel's church, and that was a very interesting piece.
Yeah.
Now it was held in Northeast Portland, but again, we're talking about a city issue.
Yeah.
I mean, why put it in? What do you think about it being in Northeast Portland as opposed? It's a city issue, right? Should have been at City Hall. Should have been at City Hall.
I'm a big proponent of meetings, involving city commissioners being held outside of downtown.
So that wasn't a commission meeting. No.
Well, were there any commissioners there?
No. Okay, no one there. The chief was there, and the mayor was there.
Yeah, I like it when you get the guys from downtown out in the community.
And Joanne wasn't there.
That's too bad she wasn't there.
Yeah,
and Bethel's a great place. When I was President King, I had a lot of meetings there.
She should have been there.
Okay,
that's one major.
But let me get back to the the police. The only thing I worry about, like I said, there's two things I worry about with Joanne with the police is she's full tilt. She doesn't understand the importance of law enforcement. There is an importance. I mean, we have some bad cops, but we've also got mostly very, very good cops. You understand? Mostly very, very good cops. And, like yesterday, for the first time in probably 4 or 5 years, we had a drive-by shooting near my house. I mean, about 30 or 40 rounds were fired off. Oh, thank God nobody got hurt. But who are you going to call when that happens? And when the cops show up to something like that, how do you want them to be? Do you want them to be aggressive, or do you want them to bring in milk and cookies? We got some black guys shooting at each other. You know what I'm talking about? In public, broad daylight. How do you want a cop to react when he shows up on a domestic violence call? How do you want a cop to, react? I mean, to me, she wants sometimes in some of her issues with law enforcement, she wants to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I grew up mostly in Portland. I've always had a little bit better economic situation than most black people in Portland in my life, whatever. So I've always been exposed, to different things to happen. I've had bad cops. I've dealt with bad cops in Portland at the Portland Police. I've also dealt with mostly good cops, Portland Police. It's a complicated situation that does need to be addressed. But the one thing is, she's doing what she's doing. I want people to one thing to really understand this and understand this clear. Portland Police need some changes. They do. But as bad as they are, this is the best they've ever been. This is nothing. A Portland cop 50 years ago when I was born, dealing with them, that could have been a deadly situation, white or black. You know what I mean? Those guys were straight up thugs. The reason why Mickey Cohen, and there's a guy who I talked to about 10, 15 years ago who did an interview, who was doing a book on the late Mickey Cohen, the mafia guy down in L.A., the head of mafia. Mickey Cohen tried to bust into Portland, and he said to this guy, our associate, Mickey Cohen, said to this guy, they couldn't bust into Portland because they couldn't get through the police. They said the police ran everything. So how can you bust into Portland if you can't possibly? That was the cops 50 years ago. Now, some people say it's still that way. I really don't think you can with today's internet and cameras and phones and stuff. I just don't think so. But there was a time, guys, where these cops, they were lethal weapons in this town. Well, now, we're not as violent in this city anymore. We got a lot of differences, and we do need some changes in how we live in law enforcement, but we got to be very careful. We don't want to make these cops so hesitant to enforce the law that those criminals, like the ones that did the shootings in Piedmont yesterday, you understand? A neighborhood full of $1 million homes, a bunch of black guys who don't live there, came into that neighborhood and dropped about 30 or 40 rounds. Broad daylight, with people in their front yards, with their families, with their children and stuff. Thank God nobody got hurt. You know what I'm talking about? We still got threats in this community, and we need people who are capable of meeting those threats.
You're talking about that particular community. What about the whole issue of gentrification? Is it still a black community? And when I think from a historical standpoint, we made an effort,
most black people that lived in inner Northeast Portland 30 years ago, the ones that are still here, live out in Northeast, deep number, what they call the deep numbers, out in the Park Rose area, stuff like that, Argate Terrace. They moved out in that direction, out there near the airport, things like that. They moved out that direction. But what is not paid attention to is approximately half the population of black people in Portland that are here now were born here in the last 30 years. The older people are gone. Most of the black people I graduated with from high school don't live in Portland, don't live in Oregon. They left. And we've got an erosion of black people leaving our city, our state. And a lot of it is...
But it's still being recognized as the black community. And, words like gentrification, things of that nature keeps coming up.
That's, different people doing that off of politics that aren't really connected.
And money.
And money, but they're not really paying attention. The biggest story about gentrification in Northeast Portland, like I've always said, is that black people want it out. And that's just not respected. It was such a burden to be there. I mean, people talk about the bad old days, and they act like the black people loved living there. Black people like my mother and stuff like that back in the days didn't love their kids and didn't want them away from crime. And that's why I'm a little concerned about people like Joanne, who are very soft on gang members, very soft on violent black people. You understand? Very, very soft on that when it comes to what we have to do with the black community. And
You
that's,
think that might have been because of her origin in terms of where she was? Because she came back from back east, right? I think Maryland.
I think part of it, but I also think it falls more in line with a lot of the white people that she, networks with as far as politically. They don't want to get into the minutia of that stuff, the fine minutia of the black community. When I hear somebody talk about gentrification, I say, how many black people did you know that lived in Northeast Portland before gentrification, as you call it? And a lot of times these white people, they get mad about gentrification, didn't know anybody. And they didn't live over there. And they didn't know anybody. But they're mad that the black people that were there are gone. There's an argument could be saying that same white person is pissed off that black person could possibly live near them now. But they didn't know any of those black people when they lived in inner Northeast. No, 30 years ago, right now, 30 years ago this week, I had 35 houses on the market, all in inner North and Northeast Portland. About 70% of my customers, the property owners, were black. They wanted out. They wanted to get out of inner North. They wanted to live in a better neighborhood. They wanted their kids to go to better schools. You know what I mean? And when they saw, and people don't take this wrong, when black people figured out that white people were interested in buying their real estate, it was like, let's get going. You know what I mean? It's like, white people want what I got. I mean, I literally had 30 years ago black people telling me, Fred, I want 40 grand for my house. I must have 40 grand for my house. And I said, great, I'll do the best I can. Don't be bringing no black people over here, because I know black people don't have 40 grand for my house. And back then it's probably right. Probably right. Probably very, very rarely.
But now today, under today's criteria, the word is that they want to move back in the community. There's been an effort. Is that real or not?
No, it's not real. I mean, there's always one or two people that may want to come back. There's some people, I'm sure, that regret selling what they had. There's some people out there, I'm sure, wishes they had kept their mother and father's home. You know what I'm talking about? Instead of selling it. I'm sure, but in general, no. What I like about Portland is the new people, the new black people, and we do have a few that are moving to Portland, a few black people. They look at Portland as they can live anywhere. You know what I'm talking about? If they want to live in Lake Oswego, they go and look in Lake Oswego. They want to live in Southeast Portland. You understand? Now, most of the black people that move to Portland, they're pretty professional. They're pretty highly educated. One person recently told me he thinks the black people who are moving to Portland, Oregon, are educated even higher than the average white person. And it could be true. Okay. They are different. It is transitioning. It's a different type of black person moving here than grew up here. Okay, and they move what's best for their careers, for their families. They look at what the best school districts are, like any other professional person would, moving to any other market.
But that point you made there, for instance, now we've got a Mayor Wheeler, right? We've got Mayor Wheeler, and the fact that he was born and raised here.
Yeah.
Should he have known that community existed back then? I mean, in all due respect, I get the feeling as if he's new. He's never.
He went to Lincoln.
He never had that history.
He went to Lincoln.
He had money.
And he's got some black friends, I'm sure, but they were probably athletes. Lincoln High School. I mean, he's around my same age. I mean, I'm older than him, but not much. And Lincoln wasn't like the schools on the East Side. I mean, I'm not hating on him because I love chasing Lincoln girls.
But he's reacting to it.
But I mean,
he's reacting to the community.
They were snobby. I mean, Lincoln kids, when it came to racism and stuff like that, they were very cliquish. It would blow me away if I found out that he even danced with a black girl, let alone had a black friend. You know what I'm talking about? They were a lot different. You know what I'm talking about? On the East Side, Jefferson High School kids, Grant High School kids, Washington was around. I think his freshman year was 81, I think it was. Anyway, it was much more integrated. You know what I mean? There was still some racism stuff going on, but nothing like Lincoln. I mean, Lincoln was just total, straight up economic one. I mean, that's another thing, too. I can't think of too many black families who were sending kids to school that had economics that could hang with the Wheeler family. I mean, Ted Wheeler could easily be the wealthiest mayor we've had in Portland over 100 years. Could be. I mean, what's his name? Goldsmith got very wealthy afterwards. You know what I mean? After being mayor. But as far as flat out being pure wealth, oh yeah,
Ted.
we may have to go back to Mayor Williams. You know what I mean? And Mayor Williams almost became vice president with Grant. So that's over 120 years. So I mean, he could be either the wealthiest mayor we've ever had, or very close. He's going to be in the top 2 or 3.
Okay, but see, like I said, now this is the first time when he's ran for certain other offices. He was county chair at one time.
Yeah, he did an incredible job.
And then he did the treasurer piece.
Did an incredible job.
And now he's mayor of the city of Portland.
Yeah.
Well, some would say no, but my point is that it's a tough job. Okay, it's a tough job. Where's he going to go from here?
A guy like Ted could be governor. He could be senator. He could be congressman. I mean, if I was any of the old guys that are Senate, or Senate, or what do you call it, Congress, I'd be worried about that young buck. I mean, he's wealthier than all of them. Oh, maybe not. No, I'm pretty sure he's wealthier than Ron Wyden's wife. I'm very confident he's much wealthier than Ron Wyden's wife. He could probably buy her and still be worth.
Let's talk about the graduation. Let's talk about politics among blacks here in Portland. And I'm thinking about the graduation, in terms of how it all started back in District 18. You were here. I was here. I was at the Observer at that point in time.
I was in the Marines, but I know you're talking.
You know what I'm saying? I was in the Corps for a while. And, my concept when I got here is that Northeast Portland stretched all the way up to the airport, this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? But it was kind of like right centrally located. And as you know, we put District 18 together, remember? And then out of that class were people like Ann Hardesty, Avell Gordley, let's see, who am I thinking about? The senator. He was part of it, but that was the senatorial.
Oh, you're talking about Bill McCoy.
Yeah, Bill McCoy and Lou Frederick. These are all.
Yeah, Lou Frederick didn't come in for many years later.
No. I'm just talking about the class as a result of 18.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Which, by the way, you don't get enough credit for. I mean, if it wasn't for you.
Yeah. But I'm still saying, why didn't they recognize? And if that was the base, why didn't they work it?
As far as the black community.
Yeah.
Money. Black community did not have the biggest influx of wealth into the black community was gentrification. You understand? I mean,
lots of money.
Lots of money. We're talking about billions.
That's right. Lots of money.
Went into the black community. But the sad thing is, in order for black people to capture it, they had to sell. They had to sell to get it, because we had redlining. I mean, guys, it wasn't until 1991 that redlining left the building in inner Northeast Portland. 1991. So if you're 40 years old or older, you lived in a time in Portland where redlining is thick. It's just thick. You could cut it with a knife. And I credit Jim Francisconi and the late Gretchen Gafuri with their efforts, along with a couple of nonprofits in this town, that ended it. But black people did not have access to equity. There was no equity growth between 1970 and 1990. Matter of fact, I'd go back and further. I'd say between 1960 and 1990, there was negative equity growth in all real estate in inner North and Northeast Portland. That means backwards.
But you don't give Goldsmith a little credit, because I think about
no, Goldsmith
Freddie
didn't
Petit. I think about Freddie Petit. I think about Herman Plummer.
Goldsmith did very, very little for black people when it came to real estate, which is surprising, because before he was a mayor, before he got on city council, he was very active in the civil rights movement. He did very good for black people there, and he helped, what's his name, Venerable Plummer, put his bank together. So I mean, Goldsmith.
Booker.
Booker. No, Goldsmith has done some things for black folks, but when he was mayor, he really didn't do a lot that helped black business, that helped black economics. 30 years ago, the black community was beyond broke. It was beyond broke. I mean, we had a handful of guys doing okay, making some money. Yeah. But if my memory is correct, about 75% of the black population was either just below or just above the poverty line. That's no longer the case. Okay. But then the 90s hit, and this huge amount of equity rushes in. The biggest amount of equity ever goes into the black community. The only problem is they had to sell their real estate to get it. that was the problem. Black people in the 1990s in inner Northeast Portland, they made money like their grandparents and parents never thought they'd ever make.
But then when you make that point, I think about PDC, Portland Development Commission.
Correct.
And I remember the Christensen, remember George and those folks were there.
Yep.
And they had access to that board. And then naturally Neil Kelly was very much involved.
Correct.
That's how Neil got involved in the process.
Correct.
He had no access, but he had that access.
Correct.
And he got very much involved in the process. And those were boom time. But the fact of the matter is there was no, as you say, there was no developing worth in businesses. MLK was there.
When I developed the Adidas building, which is now something else, it was on the corner of Alberta and MLK, right there in that corner.
Right.
That was a $1.3 million deal that we did at 9 3/4% interest, basically, right?
Yeah.
We needed a lease rate of a minimum of $15.75 a foot, triple net. Right. Those of you who understand the language, you know what I'm talking about. Well, when I did my survey in 1995 for inner Northeast Portland, for what the average rent was, we had a good guy named Bill Lee. He was very deep into Northeast Portland commercial real estate. Yeah. When I told him I needed $15, he started laughing. Right? He goes, the average rental rate for commercial real estate in this includes Alberta and MLK, was 75 cents a foot, triple net.
Wow.
We're talking about 1996. 22 years ago. So those of you who are paying $30 a foot on Alberta Street, if you just come here 22 years ago, you could have really got a deal. The real estate was so poor.
Yeah, I remember that.
That you could not finance anything. There was no bank that could legitimately do business with you without some federal inspector coming and wanting to pull your charter. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, it was below poor. So that's why PDC was so important. And PDC was part of the Adidas deal.
Yeah.
And that's why equity growth is very important. That's why I tell people who are against gentrification that you don't understand. Real estate doesn't stand still. It doesn't stay low. And when it stays low, it stays low. You understand what I'm talking about? It doesn't stay high. Mm-hmm. You understand? It fluctuates. Yeah. And that fluctuation is important because when it's low, and we've seen it. Those of you who grew up here in Portland, you've seen it if you've gone through inner Northeast Portland. Oh, yeah. The real estate was so cheap,
oh, yes.
You couldn't leverage it to develop in. We had houses. I'm talking about big old 3,000 and 4,000 square foot homes torn down in the 80s, late 80s to the early 90s, because the owner couldn't afford to put a roof on it. Roof was $5,000, house was worth $5,000. Well, darn. If I tear it down, the property taxes are going to drop. I'll pay like $200 a year in property taxes. How much is it going to cost to tear the house down? $5,000. So $5,000, put the house on, keep paying property taxes, tear it down. And that's why a lot of our lots around here came about. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, I wish I'd taken photos of a lot of these houses before they tore them down. We had some very, very nice houses.
Yeah, that was Portland.
We had some very nice houses that were torn down. Houses that most people today would call fixers and would love to jump in them. You know what I mean? They were like,
how much?
Back then they were worth, $5,000 or less. The cheapest house I ever sold, I think that was like May of '89. $1,500.
$1,500.
$1,500.
Wow.
That's not counting the ones I've given away. Wow. That people there was no equity.
What would you pay for those houses today?
Oh man, that house I sold for $1,500. It's probably worth about $750,000 to $850,000, somewhere in that area, right now. So somewhere in that. I gave away one house on a blind assumption loan. The seller paid the $500 assumption fee. But the blind assumption meant you didn't have to qualify. You just had to be an American citizen, an adult above the age of 18, and have a heartbeat. Wow. And that's all you needed. Wow. And somebody could just sign the house over to you, right? Loan and all. Wow. But the $500 assumption fee, that house was worth about 1.3, 1.2.
Okay, let's get back back to the community aspect of it. Now we've got, with Northeast Portland, there's no gentrification now, right? Is that gentrification?
No, the whole city is going to continue to gentrify.
Okay, going to gentrify. There's no black community anymore.
Well, the black community it depends. We're part of the community. We're just not, there's no place you can go and say, this is where the black people live.
Right.
And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, because the only reason we had one before, Bruce, is it was forced that way. City council up until the 1980s, forced black people to live everywhere that we've ever lived in Portland. Said you could live here, and if you try to live outside of here, we're going to send the cops down. You know, that's how it was. You know, and I mean, black people have gotten the freedom to live anywhere they want. Now, part of me is very happy about that. If a black person right now wants to live anywhere in Lake Oswego, they feel they can, and they can. If they can afford it. Now, they have to afford it. Nobody's going to say, hey, here's this house. You know what I'm talking about? But before, Bruce, it didn't matter. You know, the only reason black people were allowed to live north of Fremont. Now, you got to remember, when Vanport hit, we only had one or two people. I think Mr. Peterson had a home north of Fremont, and I think Mr. Jenkins had a house north of Fremont. But they weren't deep north of Fremont. You know what I'm talking about? We're talking about not getting into my neighborhood. There were no black people in my neighborhood in 1949 when Vanport happened. So what happened when Vanport happened, we had a lot of white people come to the aid of the black community that was at Vanport. And black people overnight were living all over the city. You know what I mean? And white people started complaining to the mayor and the city, you know, councilmen and everything, like, hey, I woke up yesterday, there's black people next door. You know what I mean? So they came up with this crazy idea. You know what we're going to do? We're going to let black people live north of Fremont. You know what I mean? And by stipulating, basically, through the cops and their way, you know, they didn't put it in the Oregonian and stuff. You know, black people started moving into, you know, Albina. I mean, deeper. There's been black people in Albina going back to 1910. But as far as going deeper into Albina, you know what I mean? And the only reason the city council did that is the city commissioners that lived over there by Washington High School didn't like seeing all those black people walking up and down Belmont. You know, it was like, God, we can't have this. You know what I mean? And those white people who live over in Northwest 23rd, you know, seeing all of a sudden, you know, a bunch of black people milling around there, you know, because what people forget about Vanport was, yes, it was negative. The city council tried to kill the black people and the white people who lived there. They were trying to get black people to leave Portland, right? Yeah. And they thought, fine, wash those Negroes away and take them Negro lovers with them, the white folks. Because there was a lot of white folks that lived down there too. And what I'm getting to is what they underestimated, and I like pointing this out to people because I think it's still to this day, the average Portland citizen, white person, is more progressive than the people that we vote for. You know what I'm talking about?
That's true.
The city council didn't expect all these white people to come from God knows where, you know what I'm talking about, and try to help these black people who just got washed out. You see what I'm talking about? They didn't know that was going to happen. You know what I'm talking about? But guess who voted those city commissioners in? These very same white people, you know? And of course, you have other white people who don't like what they did, but what I'm getting to is that's still to the point to this day. Well, this is what we've got because of that. We've got a very integrated city. I mean, I sell houses to black people that come to Portland. I just sold one. And they felt they could live anywhere. And they told me that. They're moving from Chicago. You know what I'm talking about? They're moving from, and they like Chicago. But Chicago's a segregated city. You know what I'm talking about? Today. In the 2019. They came here. They did the same thing a white person would do who's educated, you know what I'm talking about it? They looked at the schools. They looked at, well, I'm going to work here, wife's going to work here, parks are, you know what I'm talking about? They did the normal thing, no different than a white person, and they bought a house, and, you know, white people came out, how you doing? Nice to meet you. You know what I'm talking about? They told me that they had looked at houses to rent in Cicero, Chicago. And had some old Italian lady come out there and goes, you're too dark to be here. You know what I mean? And this is in the 2000s, you know. Here they come to Portland, you know, they're looking at a house. Wife loves it. You know, it's a classic story. Perfect for them or whatever. You know, neighbors leaving. Say, hey, you guys looking at this house? Yeah, we just bought it, you know. Yeah. Congratulations. Nice to meet you. My name is, you know what I mean? Completely different than their hometown. I didn't say Chicago is all bad, but I'm just saying these guys are moving to a mostly white city.
Hey, Fred,
they weren't expecting that.
Fred, but now today they're saying this is the whitest city in the.
It's been that way for like 140 years.
but it's the whitest city, and i.e. the definition is the most racist. You get all these.
There's always been racism in Portland. There's always been, but it's always been different.
But is it the racist city in the United States?
I don't think it's the most racist city outside of our politicians rarely think about black people when they make policy.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, I got a lesbian state representative, we call it head speaker of the House, and I got a bisexual governor. They're both minorities. They both know what it's like to be marginalized. And they pass policies all the time to screw over black people, just left and right. Yeah. And I'm looking at them going, Tina, who are you? You know what I'm talking about?
Representative Tina
Kotek. You know what it's like for women to ignore you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Just because you're different, people marginalize you, Tina. Don't you think about the marginalized people when you're making policy? You know, when you know what it's like, and you don't care, and you go out and you do it to black folks anyway. You know what I'm talking about?
And you're saying Kate Brown is in the same boat?
Kate Brown does that too. I mean, 2017 governor, great year. She goes out and she appoints a lot of black people to a lot of positions and stuff like that. But economically, Kate Brown's policies gut black folks left and right. It means you're like, yeah, I'll appoint you to a job that you're going to lose when I'm no longer governor, but I'm going to hurt you in your pocketbook. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to let you be completely, without needing people like me. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
She's not thinking like that. So like I said, you know, black people right now are in a dark place. Mm-hmm. That's why I honestly believe that's why so many black people, aren't voting. That's the two big stories that a lot of white liberals ignore right now. Is a lot of black people just have given up. They're not voting. And then we got a small percentage, but a big enough to cause problems, that are voting Republican. You know what I'm talking about? The New York Times said, was it last week? They're estimating that Trump is going to get next year at least 20% of the black vote. Mm-hmm. He got 9% last time. Mm-hmm. That's not a big jump. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I don't think it's because black people necessarily think Trump, in my opinion, is our savior or nothing, but there's like that thing he said in North Milwaukee, you've been voting Democrat for 50 years. Yeah. Look what you got. You got plight, you got poverty, you got crime, you know what I mean? You got the war on drugs. Can I do worse? You know what I mean? I think there's a little bit of that, but the bigger issue is a lot of black people are just checking out of politics, period. I tell people, don't focus so much on the black people who are voting for Trump. Focus on the black guy that just said, I'm taking my ballot and throwing it in the recycle. That's the guy that is the biggest threat to Democrats succeeding in the urban centers of this country. Mm-hmm. And even here in Portland. You know, black people, you can win any race in Portland and every black person can vote against you. Yeah. But I tell everybody, if you're not good with civil rights with black people, you're not good with civil rights with gays, you're not good with civil rights, you can't be trusted. You can't be trusted. If you can't handle the civil rights of black people, you can't be trusted to handle civil rights for anybody. You know, you just can't. And, but no, nationwide, black people are they're in a dark space. We're not being served by the Democrats right now. Mm-hmm. And here in Oregon, there's rent controls. I tell people, rent control is going to kick more people out of Portland, out of all of Portland, than gentrification has in the last 30 years. And black people aren't going to participate. You got to remember, with gentrification, black people participated. You know what I'm talking about? When Mr. Larry, Mr. Green, Mr. Harris, you know what I'm talking about? I can name them, Mr. Scott. When they called me up and said, Fred, I want to sell my house, they sold their houses for the most money they could get, you know? And they took that check and did whatever they want with it. The renters that are being kicked out of Portland, the black people, they don't have any equity investment. No. You understand what I'm talking about? So they're being kicked out and they're leaving the market with nothing. Mm-hmm. You understand? Yeah. It's literally a white supremacist dream. You know, it's like, hey, we're getting them out. We don't have to spend nothing to do it. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. And I tell my friends, if you don't believe me, ask every legislator that you know, ask them what is the effect of rent control on black America. And then ask them what is the expected result for black Portland, for black Oregon. Ask them. And their answers will tell you how far they've thought about this. And then I want you, if you really are into researching, find a market where rent controls come in and the black population is stabilized or increased. In every single instance in the United States history, it is depopulated communities of minorities.
So why did they pass it?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons. I think a lot of it is laziness. They didn't want to fight for the big dollars to develop real estate here in Oregon. We've got a lot of people in our politics that don't understand that we've got a supply problem. They like to characterize it as a greed. The greed problem, where what we've got a housing shortage. We've got the reverse of what we had 30 years ago when we had a housing surplus. And then on top of that, the way our housing policies are, they push us to develop the most expensive type of real estate there is to build. Our city should be going crazy trying to build SROs. Single unit occupancy, properties, should be doing more to get people to add more living spaces in their homes. You understand? Increasing the overall number of places for people to live, which would then lower.
You're sort of like threatening the homeless situation. You look like you're saying that there won't be homeless here.
If the city of Portland,
what about rent control for homeless?
Well, rent control is going to kick the homeless out.
Okay.
I'm talking about out of homes onto our streets. What I'm trying to say is, let's say we had a city commissioner or a mayor
that had the statement about
that has some guts.
They're going to be on the street. We're going to have more homeless.
We're going to have more homeless.
I thought the people with the money.
No, because it's about space. Like Ted Wheeler. Ted has 82nd Avenue. I don't know why he doesn't get up some of that land between Division and Powell, and put, let's say, 2,000 single-family occupancy units on there and rent them all out for $350. The city could do that. You know what I'm talking about? We don't need just spaces for people who can afford $5,000 a month, $4,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $2,000. We need people who can only afford $500 or less. You get my meaning?
I got you.
You see what I'm talking about? We got, usually it's the mayors that do this. You know what I'm talking about? Usually it's the mayors that say, hey, we need, some buildings here. We don't do that. If Ted Wheeler put 2,000 units on Alberta Street, not Alberta Street, but 82nd, where all the rents were 500, the single room occupancy, 500 or less, you would see a lot of our homeless situation go away.
All right. As you can see, we've got more to talk about with Fred. But hey, that's enough for the day. We've given you an hour of him. I hope you like it. Enjoy yourself. We'll see you next week. Have a good one. Thanks, Fred.
Sorry.
Looking good. It was really good.
Went by fast. Sorry about that.
It was good. Okay, we got a couple more minutes. That's back there. But like I said, please join me here on the Oregon Voters Digest. We've got some other issues to deal with. And as always, I like my surprise guest kind of a concept. You did a good job.
I hope I did.
Open the door.
Hope I gave some people
to
think about.
You got Ann Hardesty out there now. She's city council person. There's a lot to be talked about. Maybe we'll get her on. But right now she's in boot camp right now, right? What do you say?
I tell everybody you got to give her at least a year.
Okay, sounds good. All right, guys. Take care. See you. Enjoy that sun. Enjoy the weather.